Hello, you found your way to Module 5, Prepare to Negotiate, of the Transitioning Land to a New Generation Land Transfer Training. I'm Claudia Kenny with AFT, American Farmland Trust, and I'll be walking you through this module today. In addition to these online resources, we also have trained staff who would be happy to help you in whatever stage you're at in your transfer process. In the description below, you can find links to the worksheets for this lesson and information on how to connect with us. Prepare for negotiation. This module is the fifth and final of 5 consecutive modules or workshops in the Transitioning Land to a New Generation curriculum, which is designed to help participants gain the basic skills needed to participate in a farm, ranch, or land transfer process. This module prepares participants to negotiate a win-win agreement. This curriculum was created by American Farmland Trust with a lot of help from a national education team of advisors and a group of subject matter experts. It was made possible by a grant from the USDA Beginning Farmer and Rancher Development Program Award number 2020-49400-3325 with additional support from Farm Credit and members of AFT. Please note, the land transfer training will be adapted and updated as time goes on. This recording is being made on July 17th, 2024. Depending on when you access the resources, some of the material may have changed or been updated. There are a series of steps in a farm or ranch transfer process. We have it broken down into 10 steps. You likely will take most, if not all of them, but it's not a linear process. So while a certain amount of order makes sense, you likely will find you move forward and back several times before you are done. Today, we'll be building upon other steps that have been addressed in other modules of the curriculum and focus directly on the key step of negotiation. In Module 4, we learned how to adapt your story and practice effective communication skills to build support for your farm or ranch transfer goals. In some instances, this type of persuasive communication, one that involves active sharing and listening, can help you achieve your goals. In other cases, you may not see eye to eye with a specific person involved in your transfer, and it takes additional skills to prepare for and navigate through negotiations. Today, we're going to build the knowledge and skills to support a win-win negotiation by knowing who's involved and what you need from a negotiation, preparing yourself to support your position, identifying behaviors that build trust, building off your understanding of effective and persuasive communication to practice skills specific to engaging in a negotiation, and maintaining calm in negotiations by managing stress. These are the things we will talk about today. Each of you is likely in a different stage of identifying and preparing to negotiation. Take a few minutes and consider the following questions. Have you started a negotiation, or do you anticipate a negotiation? What are you negotiating for? Who are you negotiating with? If available, reference the Needs Assessment Worksheet for Module 1 and the Financial Assets Inventory for Module 2 to help answer the questions. Now that you've taken a moment to connect with where you are in considering a negotiation, let's jump in. Today, we'll focus on the key step in a farm or ranch transfer or negotiation. Negotiation is a strategic discussion designed to reach agreement. In a negotiation, each party tries to persuade the other to agree to understand their point of view. The goal of negotiation is to share ownership of the problem and ultimately the decision, meeting as many needs of each party as possible. negotiation is often thought of as compromising, or each party giving up something to meet in the middle. But if we start to think of negotiation more as collaboration, hopefully more needs can be met. Negotiation is an effort to get at what is priority and beneficial for both parties, a win-win agreement. To achieve a win-win agreement, each decision maker must consider all the needs involved. As you prepare for negotiation, explore all the needs on both sides so you have as much information as possible. When you get to the joint problem-solving part, more information is better. Remember, negotiation is a discussion, meaning not just one conversation. It often takes more than one conversation to reach the final outcome. Before your farm ranch transfer is complete, you likely will need to negotiate the terms of your agreement. This may take time, and you may want to consult with or engage an advisor to help you. It's important to prepare for negotiations so you can reach a good agreement. This is a good time to review Part 4, Alignment of Needs in Module 1's Assessment Worksheet to determine what all parties involved's bottom line might be and how to meet both your needs and the needs of those involved. We'll now talk through a number of key questions to consider. First, what are you negotiating for? Start by identifying what you need in a negotiation. Consider the following. What needs have you identified to achieve your values, visions, and goals that will be impacted in a negotiation? What wants or nice have, but factors that are not essential needs are part of the negotiation? Review and clarify the specific assets you're negotiating for. In some cases, it may be a slice of the overall transfer. In other cases, the assets involved in negotiation could cover the entire transfer situation. It's important to consider who is involved in the negotiation. Knowing who your audience is throughout your farm and ranch transfer process is central to preparing yourself for a negotiation. As in other parts of the process, a negotiation will involve individuals who play a role in the final outcome. You also want to make sure the person or people you're negotiating with have the decision-making authority to address the needs you've identified and impact that outcome. Understanding who you are working to reach agreement with and why they are key to the outcome is important. You may wish to reference the Needs Assessment Worksheet from Module 1 and review the list of key people to narrow in on who is or who might be involved in a negotiation. Finally, setting matters. You'll need to identify the best time and place to negotiate. As we'll discuss later in this module, negotiations can sometimes be challenging and stressful conversations. You'll want to consider the method, location, and timing of negotiation conversations to support a productive environment. If a trusted third-party support professional, such as a mediator, is involved, you may consider meeting in their more neutral space. This may look different based upon how the decisions are being made, as we discussed in the previous slide. While you want to be mindful of specific deadlines you've identified to move the transfer along, it's important to recognize that negotiations can oftentimes involve multi-conversations, and if a third party is involved, can be dependent on aligning many schedules. Build a timeline that acknowledges your needs, but also has some flexibility. Reaching agreement implies that more than one party will be involved in a decision-making process. Understanding the type of group decision-making process that will best serve your needs and that of the key audiences involved will help set clear expectations towards a win-win agreement. We'll dig into this point a bit more in the next slide. Since many big and small decisions are made throughout a farm transfer, it's helpful to set expectations among group members for how decisions will be made. Having a decision-making process can help specify not only how decisions will be made, but also how people will be involved and where, when, and how to plan the negotiation conversation. Often, in a farm transition, a mix of group decision-making processes is used. You may use some or all of the following processes as you work together to reach agreement. Let's go through the processes. Consultative. A decision is made by one person after the group has discussed ideas and potential solutions. Democratic. The whole group discusses the issues and is involved in deciding the outcome. A decision is made when some percentage of the group agrees. Consensus. The whole group discusses the issues and potential solutions. A decision is reached when each member supports the decision and agrees to uphold their role in its implementation. If one person does not support the decision, the group does not yet have consensus. Delegative. One person or part of the group issues a decision for the whole group. So in any of these situations, someone will need to initiate the process. Make sure that it is clear from the start, and you could be the one to make sure that it's clear and to initiate the process. Even after you've separated your wants from your needs and identified critical assets, there's still a range of outcomes that can help reach those needs. To better understand this range, it's important to prioritize needs and pinpoint what is non-negotiable, that is, what is absolutely needed to achieve your values, visions, and goals. You can start with mapping out the ideal income and what that negotiation result looks like, where all of your needs are met. However, as mentioned earlier, negotiations will likely involve some give and take, and so you will also need to prioritize your needs to consider what you might be willing to give up. What is less critical to reach an acceptable outcome? This can help you to reach a midpoint outcome that is positive for both parties and supports a win-win, even if you're not reaching the ideal outcome. Finally, consider what you cannot give up, those non-negotiables, to know at which point you may need to walk away. There is a space in Part 3 of the Prepare to Negotiate worksheet to group what is an ideal outcome for you with your negotiable and non-negotiable needs. Prioritizing your needs will help you clarify them with the other party so you can be an active collaborator in the process. Using the Prepare to Negotiate worksheet parts 1, 2, and 3, spend a few minutes to answer the following questions. What are you negotiating for? Who are you negotiating with? Where, when, and how might you plan to negotiate? In Module 1, we worked on vision, values, and goals, financial assets, inventory, and needs assessment worksheets. If you have completed those, you may want to look back at them now. Some of these questions you may want to come back to later, and that's okay. This is meant to get you pointed in the right direction, and you'll likely want to follow up on this later. Part 2, skills to reach agreement. Now that you're starting to prepare, we'll talk about the skills, particularly communication skills, that will help you support a positive negotiation. Negotiation conversations are typically not the first interaction you will have with the person or persons involved as decision makers in a farm or ranch transfer. Negotiations are a discussion, often involving multiple and sometimes very difficult conversations. It takes time, preparation, and care. In Module 1, we introduced 3 components to building and strengthening relationships that are adapted here to support strong relationships during negotiations. Sustaining healthy relationships that you've worked to build throughout the process will improve your chances of success and lead to better outcomes for all the parties involved. To get a win-win agreement, you'll want to revisit key behaviors that not only build but maintain trust, take into account the point of view of others that are part of the decision-making process, and practice skills that support effective communication. We'll touch on all these points today, but spend a little more time on the skills to communicate effectively. Behaviors to build and maintain trust. These 7 actions or behaviors are important to build trust in farm and ranch transfer situations. These were introduced in Module 1. Tied to considering point of view and communicating effectively, we see them as building blocks that lead to successful business dealings and conversations and negotiations. Let's review each behavior. Tell the truth. As you consider what you need out of a negotiation, it's important to be honest with yourself and with others. Only by letting others know where you stand and being truthful will you have the chance to move towards agreement that has mutual needs and interests in mind. Show respect. Engaged listening and a consideration of others' needs are ways to show respect. No matter how group decisions are being made, make sure not to talk over people or ignore others, even if you might disagree with them. Be transparent. Be open about what you want and need and what you plan to do, especially when your actions affect other people involved in your transfer. Negotiations are not meant to beat the other people involved into a win-lose situation. Withholding important details might result in a negative outcome for both parties involved. Face reality. A transfer process that leads to the need for negotiations means that you may have hit a few bumps in the road, and that's okay. You'll likely have more than one tough conversation, and avoiding tough conversations doesn't make the need for them go away. So it's important to name the issues you need to deal with and address challenges before they turn into problems. Be accountable. You won't get everything right along the way, and that is okay. But do take responsibility for your actions and words. Apologize for any missteps or mistakes. Keep promises. Keep your word. Don't overextend and commit to doing things you will not or cannot do just to reach an agreement. Give appreciation. While it's important to bring your needs and experience to a negotiation, it's important also to bring humility. Credit where credit is due. Show you care. It's usually a tough conversation for all parties involved. It's important to understand the point of view of other people involved in your farm or ranch transfer situation. Be clear about what you want and need, but consider the other party. First, build understanding needed for consensus by coming in with an open mind and empathy for the other people. This can help reduce stress and support a positive outcome. It's a good idea to consider the other person's needs. What do you know about them and their cultural and generational differences? Put yourself in their shoes and try to understand where they're coming from. What do they need? What's their point of view? If you don't know, you can ask. Looking for common ground is especially important in negotiations. Try to find the overlap between your wants and needs and theirs so that you both benefit from the transfer. We'll come back to this idea later in this section, but first, let's go into the third part of sustaining relationships, which is communicating effectively. The basis of good negotiation is good self-expression and good listening. In Module 1, we introduced how to strengthen key relationships by building trust, communicating effectively, and understanding the other's point of view. In Module 4, we expanded on skills to communicate effectively by adapting your story to a different audience and using verbal and nonverbal communications in order to build support for your goals. In negotiation, practicing these skills all together will support a better outcome, ideally a win-win outcome that benefits everyone involved. Listen, listen, listen. In a negotiation, it's a good idea to spend more time listening than talking. Listen to understand the other person's needs and feelings, as negotiations can pull both out. Share. It's important to prepare carefully before you enter into a negotiation. Be clear about your needs and be able to state them concisely. You should start by laying out the full scope of what you want, but also bring a willingness to compromise. Everyone is coming in with their own needs to be met. This means making sure you know the minimum outcome you're willing to accept based on the needs you've prioritized. Depending on your situation, being open and honest about your feelings you have around the situation will help others understand your point of view. Don't worry, we're going to practice connecting our needs to feelings in a clear and practical way. So if sharing your feelings is new or uncomfortable for you, you'll walk away today with some tools to practice with. Understand. The verbal and non-verbal communication cycle that is part of listening and sharing will also help you understand the next steps from each conversation in the discussion. It's okay if agreement is not reached in the first meeting. Both parties may need time between conversations to process their feelings or what the other party said. If you cannot get to a place where your non-negotiable needs can be met, it's okay to walk away. So let's dive into these communication skills to use when negotiating to get to a win-win agreement. When people express their feelings and needs, you can reflect them back to show you've heard and understood them. This is a way to practice communication skills as well as understanding another's point of view. Even when people don't express feelings or needs, we can be curious about what they might be feeling and needing. We can listen for what they might be feeling and needing and make some guesses. We spend time talking about our needs assessment. With those, we focused on the more physical or tangible needs, such as a house or land. The needs listed here on the Communicate to Reach Agreement worksheet are grouped by well-being, connection, and self-expression. They address a different kind of human need, and while they are related to the more physical needs of your farm or ranch transfer, they are different, but no less important to recognize. These needs can be harder to first recognize and then express, but they're important to listen for in yourself and others, as they may help you understand others' reactions and responses. Let's think through an example. You'll want to grab the list of feelings and needs to reference. Let's make some guesses about what feelings and needs may be underlying the following statement. Imagine a retiring farmer telling a successor farmer, "You should run the business the way I have." What feelings or needs could be underlying this statement? What might be going on with the retiring farmer? Connect the feelings that you think of with a need you imagine the retiring farmer may be having. Take a moment and jot down some guesses. Use the list of feelings and needs to help you identify them. Okay, here's an example of a guess the successor farmer may have. I'm wondering if you are feeling impatient and really wanting to know you will have some stability and security after the farm transfer. Notice the way I started this with "I am wondering." This is the guessing part, and it's more disarming. If you state what you think people feel or need, they might feel defensive and less open to telling you more. You may have made some different guesses, and that's okay. After the guess, what happens next? Now that you've made the guess, the speaker will identify or offer other information, which will help you understand what is most important to them. Your guess may not land, and that's okay. Just listen and reflect back whatever new information the speaker shares. And so here's our retiring farmer. Here's how he responds. "No, I'm not impatient. I'm really worried. I'm worried that we won't be able to have the farm change hands in a way that provides stability for the people who work here." And the successor farmer. "Oh, I see." He's going to reflect back now. "You're worried about how all this might affect the people who work here and wanting to make sure that they have stability." We'll come back to naming feelings and needs again, but first, a few more thoughts on listening. You might be familiar with the expression "to wear your heart on your sleeve." It alludes to nonverbal communication and can often reveal our feelings before we verbalize them. So what role does body language or nonverbal communication play in negotiations? How does it help to maintain healthy relationships, even if topics bring challenging feelings to the surface? Here are a few nonverbal communication skills to keep in mind as you listen for meaning to understand needs and feelings. Consider body language. Think about what feelings you convey through movement. This may be unconscious. Do you tend to nod or shake your head to indicate you're listening? Do you cover your face with your hands when frustrated? Do you move your hands and arms in the air when you're excited? You can watch for others to get a sense of how they feel in the situation. What is the other person's body movement telling you? Watch for eye contact. Eye contact is tricky because it means different things in different cultures, and it can be affected by age and gender. It also means different things in different conversations. Generally, it's a sign of confidence, honesty, and respect. If a conversation has more conflict or charged emotions, too much eye contact can be seen as threatening or make people uncomfortable. It's good to pay attention. Be aware of facial expressions. Facial expressions are often thought to be universally understood. While that may not be entirely true, most cultures share some basic facial expressions like surprise and happiness, anger and fear. Watching others' facial expressions will help you understand how they might be feeling. Observe physical space. We all have different comfort with physical space. This comfort is determined by culture, the situation, and the closeness of the relationship. Physical space can communicate nonverbal messages, including signals of affection, aggression, or dominance. It's important to observe movement in physical space to comprehend needs and feelings. There's a lot to listening besides just not talking. To be an active listener, remember these things and what we talked about guessing for meaning. Listening and expressing usually happen back and forth. So part of listening is also clarifying and asking for more information. Now let's look at the more expressive side of effective communication. We're going to practice a few tricks to be more effective at communicating what we want while working to gain consensus in a negotiation. As was introduced in Module 1 and detailed in Module 4, verbal communication is the use of words written or spoken. We'll discuss these skills in more detail in the following slides, but at a quick glance. Sharing your needs and feelings helps you to clarify for yourself, but also helps others know how to meet your needs. We've talked about how to listen to them, but now we'll practice saying them as well. Making requests, not demands. Invite people into a conversation to build consensus by making requests, not demands. We'll practice this. Take a pause. Respond instead of react. Negotiations are part of a larger process of communicating effectively and will require you to respond thoughtfully rather than reacting emotionally, especially if you're having a stressful interaction and need to maintain a strong relationship through multiple conversations. Knowing when to speak can be as powerful as the words you verbalize. Now let's practice some of these skills together. We'll start off with the skill of sharing. We've already talked about listening for meaning by looking for others' feelings and needs. Now we're going to work on expressing some of our own. For some of you, this may come very naturally and be part of how you already communicate. For others, this practice can be challenging. Regardless of how comfortable you are saying how you feel and what you need, clarifying it for others is a helpful step in negotiations, but also other conversations. Take another look at your Communicate to Reach Agreement worksheet. Pause for a few minutes to think about part 1 and 2. Write your answers if you want to. Now we'll talk about our second skill, making effective requests instead of demands. You can follow along in part 3 of Communicate to Reach Agreement worksheet. Requests are how we attempt to meet our needs in collaboration with others. Though many of our needs are met in collaboration with others, it's important to note that no one is responsible for meeting our needs. That is our responsibility alone. We make requests of ourselves or others to meet our needs. Making a connection is key to building relationships. An effective communicator asks for things in a way that the other person can understand. Making clear requests is a skill that will lead to positive outcomes. A formula for an effective request is specific, doable, and meant to result in a positive action. A positive action is what you want someone to do rather than what you don't want them to do. This is not to say that demands are never appropriate, and you may make them sometimes. For our purposes here, we want to work on shifting demanding statements into requests so the receiver is more likely to be open to what you're saying. A listener will be more willing to hear what you have to say if they don't feel like they need to protect or defend themselves. How do we know if we're making a request or a demand? The general rule of using I instead of you is a good start. Starting off with you are doing this or you should do that tends to make people defensive. Start conversations with I instead of you. Stating your experience and perspective will help people relate to you and understand where you're coming from. Start with turning you into I statements. Let's look at these demands as an example. You should run the business the way I have. You should use no-till practices to combat climate change. Let's just start changing them from you should to I want. I want you to run the business the way I have. I want you to use no-till practices to combat climate change. You may have other ideas about how to soften that as well. Here's another example. My preference is that you use no-till practices. Changing you to I in conversations is a simple step to practice and easy to remember. Let's go into conversation setups a little deeper now. How can we add more information so that the person we're talking to can do something about what you need? How can we make our requests specific, doable, positive actions? We can build connection with another person and ask for a solution that meets our needs. To build connection, say more about how you are feeling, what your needs are. You can also simply recognize they have their own feelings and needs about the situation as well. Connecting with another person, asking for and giving empathy is a helpful skill in negotiations. To ask for a solution, say more about what you need. What is a simple action someone could take to meet your need? Let's pull it all together with an example. The example is, I want you to run the farm the way I have. Let's use that example and turn it into a request by using the I statement, by layering and connecting information about our feelings and needs, and by ending with a specific, doable, actionable request. Let's start with offering some information to create a connection, feelings and needs. For example, I'm afraid there won't be enough income to support my retirement plan. I need to feel secure that that will be taken care of. How is the person feeling about this? Afraid is the feeling. The need is security in retirement. I feel this and I need that. Then we will offer a solution or your preference. What is an acceptable option that would meet your needs? Example, I want you to run the business the way I have. Follow that with a request, a specific, doable, positive action. Would you be willing to? And here's the example. Can we set up a time to talk through the pros and cons of this idea? A connection is a statement. This is how I'm feeling and why. And a request statement, I want this, and a positive, simple action like, can we set up a time to talk? Setting up a conversation this way will help the person you are talking to understand what they can do to help you meet your needs. It's just the start of a conversation, and informed decision-making requires good information. With a request, there's a willingness to learn more, even if the first answer is a no. As you think about how to make requests, also consider your intention. What will you do if you hear a no? Or if the person is not immediately receptive to your idea? Even if you speak your request as nicely as possible, you may still hear a no. If you made a true request, you can ask for more information to find out the reason behind the no, so you have more information to work with. Question 4 in part 3 of your Communicate to Reach Agreement worksheet has space for you to think about how you would prepare for a no. Preparing yourself for a no answer will help you learn more if you hear it in the moment. Now, last but not least, we're going to talk about our third skill, which is turning reactions into thoughtful responses. As has been mentioned throughout this module, negotiations are rarely a single standalone conversation. They are a discussion that often includes many conversations. As such, it's important to ensure you're communicating in ways both verbal and nonverbal that invite constructive conversation over time and that connect to the foundation of strong relationships you've built through trust behaviors and considering points of view. Just as you listen for meaning by tuning into the feelings and needs you understand from others involved in a negotiation, how you present yourself leaves an impression on them. Each conversation presents a chance to listen and share, while a constructive consensus-building conversation goes a step further to respond instead of react. Reactions tend to go like this. Something happens, you panic, then you proceed. Responses tend to go like this. Something happens, you pause, you process, you plan, then you proceed. This is a quote from Viktor Frankl, who survived Nazi concentration camps and went on to create foundational work in the field of psychology. He reminds us that we have a choice to make when we communicate. Between stimulus and response, there is space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. Response is a skill that may take a while to learn, especially for those who tend to react quickly. Reaction is not a bad or negative thing in and of itself, but in negotiation or in a heated moment, a reaction can cause damage to relationships or get in the way of getting our needs met. Okay, we'll come back to this slide. This is slide 32. Redo this one. Okay, here we go. This is a quote from Viktor Frankl, who survived Nazi concentration camps and went on to create foundational work in the field of psychology. He reminds us that we have a choice to make when we communicate, or in his words, experience a stimulation. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. Response is a skill that may take a while to learn, especially for those who tend to react quickly. Reaction is not a bad or negative thing in and of itself, but in negotiation or in a heated moment, a reaction can cause damage to relationships or get in the way of getting our needs met. The space between stimulus and your response gives you a chance to make a response that is wiser. The goal of this self-awareness is to have more choice about how you show up and what you say. Let's walk through some steps to help you practice moving from reaction to response. Here are some steps to remember that will help you move from react to respond. Start by thinking about a time that you were reactive, something that triggered you and that caused you to have the need to fight or run or just freeze. And take a moment just to ground yourself and think about that scenario. Now that you can picture yourself having that reactive response, take a long, slow breath. Think about taking a pause in this moment of this reaction. Notice any physical sensations you were having. Were your fists clenched? Were your shoulders tight? Was your stomach queasy? What nonverbal cues were you sending out in this moment? Check in on what feelings were you having. Were you afraid, angry, worried, mad? You can refer back to your list of feelings if that's helpful. And now, building on the work you've already done, see if you connect each of the feelings you listed to a need. What were you longing for most in this moment of reaction? Part 3, managing stress and negotiations. Hopefully the skills we just learned in practice to reach agreement will minimize stress, and yet given that negotiations arise from differences in needs, these discussions can be difficult and stressful. A farm-ranch transfer and the conversations and negotiations that support it are stressful enough, and you may also encounter other challenging situations, among them the 5 Ds: death, disease, disability, debt, and divorce. Although today we're considering managing stress and maintaining calm in the context of negotiations, the knowledge and skills can be applied to these and other challenging situations you might face. Understanding what happens to our brains when we are stressed helps us to understand what we can do when we or someone we are communicating with is not in agreement or loses their cool. When we are in a stressed state, we can't access the part of our brain that rules logic and reasoning. Our perception becomes narrowed, and our ability to take in and absorb new information is limited. We can look inward and blame externally, limiting our ability to be empathetic and see a situation from another's point of view. It can also limit our ability to communicate effectively. Like in the situation we just thought about with our react and respond exercise, brains on stress can defer to a fight, flight, or freeze reaction. Altogether, your brain on stress can lead to behaviors that break down trust. You can follow along this slide in the Address Stressful Conversations worksheet. In a negotiation conversation, managing stress can help you retain your decision-making role. You can utilize the skills you've already learned for reaching agreement to manage stress and negotiation. You can also remember these steps to get out of a state of alarm. These are a few core skills we can use when we are in a state of alarm or when we're working with someone who is in a state of alarm. Practicing these skills before you are stressed will help you as you get ready for challenging conversations and negotiation. Okay, and we're just going to go through each of these. 1, name feelings, needs, physical sensations, and emotions. This should sound familiar. You have a nice long list of feelings to choose from. We also practice naming physical sensations as part of moving from react to respond. Moving from react to respond alone can be a stress management tool, but these are a few other tricks. 2, take a break. It's okay to pause. Sometimes you need to walk away in a moment to cool down and to reach the longer-term goal. Be with someone who understands. This may require outside professional support or a trusted friend. And number 4, reframe to the big picture. Details that might be points of tension can feel less heavy when taken in a broader context. Try shifting to look at a bigger context, a career instead of a job, overall health, the impact on family or friends, and not just on yourself or the other person. Let's talk about each of these in a little more detail. This slide should look familiar to you today. In addition to being an effective communication skill, naming what is going on for you internally, your feelings, physical sensations, and emotions can help you navigate a stressful moment. You can follow along in the Address Stressful Conversations worksheet. Look at the first question. Take a moment to think about a situation in your transfer that's causing some stress. You can write it down if you like. Take a moment and picture that situation. Take a moment to think about or write down how you're feeling physically and emotionally when you think about that situation. Let's talk about the skills for taking a break in a stressful moment. Thinking of the same scenario, imagine how you could take a break or step away. How would you ask for or suggest a break in a way that would keep the conversation open? Could we use what we learned in effective communication? Think about your situation and think about how you would like to suggest a break if things get heated. Here's an example. I'm noticing I'm a bit overwhelmed and would prefer to take some time to digest all we've talked through. Can we meet again tomorrow to continue the discussion? Or here's another example. This is a lot to think about. I need to take a little break and grab some water. Can we come back to the discussion in 10 minutes? As in any step of the farm transfer process, it's important to identify a team and lean on those team members at the right moment. In a negotiation process, it can be helpful to work with a mediator, a professional that's trained to work through stressful situations as a neutral ally. Mediators seek solutions that are fair to all parties. You may find a list of trained agricultural mediators in the student resource list. Be sure to keep in mind the following qualities. You'll want to ensure you find someone with integrity and sensitivity, who listens well, has strong communication skills, and who can define and clarify issues. A mediator may not be needed, and you may need someone outside of the situation altogether to support you. You can list some ideas for support in the Addressing Stressful Conversations worksheet, question number 3. Continue thinking of the same scenario. Let's talk about reframing to a big picture. Details that might be points of tension can feel less heavy when taken in a broader context. Try shifting to look at a bigger context, a career instead of a job, overall health, the impact on family and friends, and not just on yourself and the other person. Refer back to when you originally identified what you're negotiating for. This started with revisiting values, visions, goals, and needs. In stressful situations, when our brain has narrowed its perception, we can forget to zoom out and see the big picture, move out of the mindset of scarcity, and move out to the bigger picture. There's a lot of possibility that rests between an ideal and an acceptable outcome, and it's easy to lose sight when tensions are high. You can write down your ideas in the worksheets. We've covered a lot today and over the rest of this course. Let's review one more time for good measure. These are the skills that need practice to be more effective. The next steps are going to be different for everyone. What will a successful negotiation look like for you? And what are 1 or 2 next steps to get you there? Look back at the Prepare to Negotiate worksheet, page 5. There's a timeline. You can write down some thoughts there. There's also a basic checklist to help you think about preparing for the next steps. You may want to finish or come back to some of the worksheets we worked through today. We didn't cover it in the session, but in the Address Stressful Conversations worksheet, there's a letter writing prompt to help you get stressful feelings off your chest. Another good practice after this workshop is to revisit your vision, values, and goals that are covered in Module 1. Practice sharing those with a partner or practice sharing that with someone involved in the transfer. The most important part is that you try to take one step toward your ideal or even an acceptable outcome. As a reminder, there are a series of steps in a farm or ranch transfer process. We've broken it down to 10 steps. You likely will take most of, not all of them, but it's not a linear process. So while a certain amount of order makes sense, you will likely find you move forward and back several times before you're done. There may still be steps in between negotiate and finalize documents. You may have to negotiate multiple times before you get an acceptable outcome. You may want to go back to any of the previous steps to refine, adapt, or clarify. And if you're at the step of negotiate, you're close. Keep your eye on your vision and values and keep setting goals. Set up your support network to get you across the finish line. Thanks for listening to Module 5, Prepare to Negotiate, which is part of the land transfer training. American Farmland Trust has trained staff who can help you continue in your process. Look in the description below to find out how to connect to us. Thanks.